Breaking, Trump will make decision over next step in Iran within the next 2 weeks. Now, what's going on with the next 2 weeks? Why does he need that much time? Okay, well, the White House says it could take a couple of weeks for Iran to produce a nuclear weapon. So Trump is basically saying, like, maybe we'll sit back and wait to see if they get a nuclear weapon. Interestingly, this is also how much time it's expected to take for the USS Nimitz to get into the region. So maybe Trump was just sitting there and they were like, we need the Nimitz in the region for security purposes. If you make a move now, we're going to be lacking. So why don't we just wait? Then he's like, okay, actually, in all seriousness, the scary thing is maybe the whole negotiating play where he's like, I want to negotiate is to hold off Iran for the time being so that we can mobilize our military effectively.
I mean, maybe. I just don't. That honestly would make me think that the strike that they're intending on is more than just a strike. If they're like, oh, we have to move more assets into position, then it's not just, B-2s with 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, right? This is moving significantly more manpower into the area if they're waiting for a whole carrier strike group. There's 2 there now, if I understand correctly, and they're waiting for a third. That's a lot.
Well, it tracks with Trump's negotiation strategy, which is maximum pressure. I mean, if anyone read The Art of the Deal, you'd know what's going on.
No, I mean, I totally, but the point being, like, I'm totally down with that kind of posture. But if it was only going to be just a strike to take out this one installation or whatever, you wouldn't need 3 carrier groups, and I don't know that.
2 of them are in the Eastern Mediterranean, so that's more of a defensive posture. But moving this carrier strike group,
they're not in the Red Sea anymore.
I think one is in the Red Sea, one is in the Eastern Mediterranean. Regardless, it's still a lot of distance from Iran. But this third carrier strike group is positioning in a bit more of an offensive posture. So yeah, basically just ratcheting up the pressure on Iran.
Yeah. I mean, Tim, what do you think? I mean, does anything ever happen?
That's not a question for me. It's a question for Mary.
Mary, does anything ever happen?
The answer is no. It's always going to be no.
Okay.
So then there's not going to be a strike, or there is going to be?
That's no strike, right?
No strike.
No, we'll check back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
No strike. I think in the long run, Israel loses.
I hope nothing happens. I hope we all hope there's.
You said you think Israel loses.
Yeah, I think Israel's. I'd make the argument that if you're doing any kind of meaningful math, then Israel's lost now. So, and what I mean by that is, let's say you're looking at your bank account and you got 10 grand in it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I got 10 grand in my bank account. And then you look at your monthly liabilities and it's, 1,730 and your income is only 750. You're going to be like, oh, crap. Okay, I only got a few months left before I go negative. That's what I see with the situation with Israel, and the reason why I think that they want to do this attack now. I don't know that it has anything necessarily to do with nuclear weapons. They claim it does, but there's another thing to consider in that sentiment for Israel is rapidly declining. Rapidly. And they seem completely incapable of doing anything about it. No. Their marketing, their PR, and their efforts are so pathetic that I'm just like, okay, in 10 years, the U.S. will completely cut off Israel.
Yeah.
The right is largely, we shouldn't be funding Israel. Israel going to do what they want. The left hates Israel. And then you've got a component on the right that hates Israel too. So I'm looking at the math and I'm just like, yeah, they're not going to have any U.S. money. This is bad news for them. They're making this move on Iran now because if they wait any longer, the U.S. is going to cut them off and then they can't. So they have no choice.
Yeah, their political capital has an expiration date. And then also like within internal politics in Israel, like Netanyahu is on the hot seat right now. He's outflanked to the right. He's outflanked to the left. They have a huge demographic crisis because the Hasidic population like triples every 10 years. So they're going to have a situation in 30 years where they're going to like have serious demands for a much more theocratic government. Where right now they kind of this secular government. So yeah, like you said, I mean, they have a limited amount of political capital, and that political capital has an expiration date on it that is rapidly approaching.
I think what you're go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think what you're seeing on the right today, at least, is that more and more people, though, are asking that any intervention could be explicitly tied back to some sort of a cost-benefit analysis for American citizens, right? And so if that's what you're solving for, is for what's in the best interest for the prosperity and security of American citizens, then there's sort of a spectrum of basically potential different pathways you could go down. And the base case for the United States is something like no intervention. And then there's a sliding scale, basically, where there's some negotiations, and then there's some aid, arms. You go all the way down to boots on the ground or regime change, et cetera, et cetera. And I think increasingly on the right, at each of those different points on the spectrum, people are asking the cost benefit question specifically. And I think what makes this challenging is we have people like Lindsey Graham, for example, who very recently basically made the claim, I believe this was on Twitter, where he said, first Iran will get nukes, they'll nuke Israel, and then they'll nuke America. And really what that's doing is, in the base case scenario, in the no intervention side, he's elevating the perceived cost of no intervention, basically. But what I would argue is people on the right have been sort of gaslit on this issue a number of times. If you think about Lindsey Graham specifically said the exact same thing about Putin, where he said first Putin would go into Ukraine, then he'd take Europe, and then he would land on America's shores. And in my case, I'm not a specific Israel-Iran expert, right? I don't actually know what the exact chances are that Iran will nuke New Jersey. But Lindsey Graham already played those cards when he claimed that Putin was going to do an amphibious assault on Connecticut, which was never reasonable. And so I think then you add in also Iraq, Afghanistan, the Vietnam War, all of these things. And I think people on the right it's reasonable to be skeptical when these people sort of bang the same sets of arguments. Now, it might be that there might need to be some aid or negotiations or things like this that would end up being in the best interest of Americans. But it's really important that we fixate on American citizen interests as the core thing we're solving for here.
I was just thinking about how we were talking before about Qatar. The accusations that they're funding all this influential operation, Israel's got money. Why wouldn't they be doing the same thing? So if it is the case that Qatar is funding a bunch of sentiment opposed to Israel, and, we do know that, like, Al Jazeera Plus was super woke. The issue is, why isn't Israel doing the same thing? And more importantly, why aren't they winning? Let's look at it this way. Let's say that there's a bunch of foreign adversaries that are flooding U.S. social media. This is the more legitimate accusation, in my opinion, that you've got people in, say, Pakistan. They create social media accounts where they masquerade as Americans and then will spam blast people's feeds. And this is like one guy. It's like literally not a campaign. It's literally a guy in Pakistan, and he's like, I'm an American. And this is largely why many people have called for Elon to create a nation filter so we can only get tweets from Americans. And then I tweeted something similar. Why aren't the Western powers that support Israel doing the exact same thing with sock puppets? Why aren't they creating a counter narrative that Israel is the victim, that Israel should win? How is it that Israel is losing the PR game?
Well, how do you know they're not?
Well, okay, then the reality is they're weak and pathetic.
Well, I think they're also dependent on the goodwill of previous generations, where it was kind of a consensus, especially among like political wonks, that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East we have to support this, and it was a given. So I don't even know if they had a media apparatus to whirl up in time for a situation like this, where within 10 years the wind completely blew the opposite.
No, I'm saying, like, the U.S. has engaged in sock puppetry before.
Right.
They did it in the Arab Spring. So there's no, like, I'll put it this way. If there's a bunch of countries that hate Israel and their citizens are spam blasting social media saying, like, don't support Israel, where are the individuals who support Israel to counter that message? They don't seem to exist.
Well, yeah, I mean, you definitely see the fellas on Twitter, the little dogs that are supporting Ukraine, and you really don't see a similar, an analogous organization that's supporting Israel, though.
There's certainly a lot of prominent personalities that are pro-Israel.
Yeah, but
there's a lot of politicians.
They're not the same kind of sock puppets that you're talking about. Those
I'm talking about a grassroots, and whether real or fake, I don't care. I'm saying Israel and its allies and the West are incapable of countering the narrative that has emerged around Gaza and Israel. Incapable.
I think it's a good point. I think there is sort of this pincer move where both the left and the right are their sentiment on this issue is shifting. I mean, I think you've pulled it up on one of the streams earlier this week. I mean, if you pull up the
Pew
data,
research.
if you pull up the data just over the past decade alone, so you don't even need to look over multiple decades. It's been a rapid shift.
Why doesn't Israel just use their connections in government to get anybody critical of Israel banned? Why doesn't Israel have people?
Because then you'll alert the Goyim.
Well, like Hassan. Why doesn't Israel just get Hassan Piker banned?
I don't know.
Well, I think that maybe the alternative to sock puppetry in favor of Israel is fomenting a message on the right that you shouldn't care about this conflict and that you shouldn't talk about it. And that's a sentiment I've seen on the timeline in the past week, especially.
So here's like a good example. Lurch685 says, why isn't Israel doing advocacy? WTF is PragerU then? So if you lack the understanding of the point I'm making, let me try and help you out. There are run-of-the-mill accounts, not big organizations at a grassroots level, that all over X are saying Israel bad. And perhaps it's because Israel bad. I'm not arguing that. There is not the inverse. There are some people who do it, but it's nowhere near the volume. And so my question is, why isn't Israel engaged in this kind of manipulation? Why aren't Western nations engaged in this PR campaign, whether real or fake, whatever? My point is, online sentiment right now, whether it's from Americans or otherwise, what you see when you go on X is Israel bad. Mm-hmm. You do see some people saying, yay, Israel, but they're usually ineffective messaging, and there's not that many of them.
Well, that's why I'm saying the majority of the messaging I'm seeing from prominent right-wing figures is not Israel bad or Israel good. It's you shouldn't care or pay attention to this issue because it doesn't concern you as an American, which is false. That's most of what I've been saying. And I don't think that that's necessarily people getting paid to say that, but the trickle-down effect is like that is the message that's getting echoed throughout the right wing.
Do you think that Ukraine had the grassroots support here in the United States, or was it mostly?
Yes,
it did.
This is another point. This is what I'm trying to make.
Explain. Yeah,
you can see random libs all over X with Ukrainian flags.
That's true,
and they will spam you into oblivion. And not only that, I mean, look at the flack that I got when I said, okay, so the story is, Germany issued an arrest warrant for Ukrainian. There were 3 Ukrainians accused of bombing the Nord Stream pipeline. They did it to force the West and Russia into a war to their benefit, which I would say is a criminal action against a NATO ally. And I said that makes Ukraine an enemy of this country. Germany issued the arrest warrant. Holy crap. The spam that I had to deal with was insane. Like, hundreds of emails every hour. It's 100 plus. I'm getting death threats. Jordan Klepper in the Daily Show did a segment about it like a year later, and it's like an ongoing talking point where like Tim, was paid by Russia. He's Russia. Wow, nothing like that for Israel. Nothing.
But
there's a little
I'm
bit
trying
sometimes.
To say is it might be more effective for them to encourage Americans not to consider
Israel?
This issue.
You're saying Israel is advocating people not care about Israel?
I'm just saying it would be more effective for them to spread that message.
Israel?
Yeah.
So okay, I'm just trying. This is not an argument.
It would be more effective to encourage people on the right to just say, trust Trump. He's going to do the right thing no matter what.
I disagree. Prominent conservatives who a few years ago had no opinion on Israel have now been getting millions of views saying Israel is evil.
Like whom?
There's a handful of personas. I'm not going to drag this into drama, but there are prominent conservatives who 3 years ago were not talking about Israel and now routinely talk about Israel. And from a PR standpoint, this is pathetic in terms of Israel's strategy.
Well, I think that
okay, let's put it this way. 18 to 49-year-olds went from, in 2022, 35% were critical of Israel. Now 50% are. No country is going to be like, that's a good thing.
With the passage of time and as boomers die, I think Republicans see an obvious shift where Gen Z and millennial people on the right are not going to have popular support for Israel. I think that it might have something to do with less religiosity in those generations, that they didn't absorb those dispensationalist ideas.
But why critical of Israel?
I didn't say that they're necessarily critical of Israel.
That's what the shift was. From 35 to 50, it was critical of Israel. Like a growing trend in the 18 to 49-year-old demographic is critical of Israel. And the question is, why is that happening?
It's also because a lot of young people are left wing, and part of that kit and caboodle is being pro-Palestine.
But younger Gen
means-
Z is moving rightward.
Gen Z men, not.
But
I wouldn't say Gen Z in general.
So it is largely Gen Z men, but younger Gen Z is shifted rightward. I think supporting Trump.
Yeah.
And although the females are still left leaning, Gen Z at a younger Gen Z is shifting this way. My point is, if Israel, my point is this: Israel's PR tactics, cyber war, and informational war is one of the worst I've ever seen. I mean, you can look at countries that have done a way better. Singapore does a better job of repairing its image.
Yeah.
And now what we have is, sure, October 7th was bad, but the bombings that Israel's engaged in have gone viral. And they are being spread around like crazy to the point where there are people on TikTok that just spread photos and videos of dead babies. And this narrative messaging works. So it goes like this: out of sight, out of mind. This is why Coca-Cola spends billions of dollars on marketing, even though everybody knows what Coca-Cola is. They want to make sure that when you're driving down the street, you see the sign. Because then when you go to the restaurant, you're like, I'll have a Coke, because it's in your mind. You know it. Because of the Israel-Gaza war, and whatever is going on with social media, the mass spreading of these videos, you generate a movement of people that are going to protest in the street and do all of these things. If there was a suppression of any conversation pertaining to the war, you wouldn't get activists, because they would not know it was happening. If you don't know it's happening, you can't partake. So the point I'm ultimately making is Israel is either incapable, and the West is either incapable or unwilling to engage in PR strategies to defend the image of Israel and support thereof.
It's also a numbers game too, because like with Ukraine, the support for Ukraine was purely political. They're a democracy. They're in Europe. We should support them. But like the dichotomy with Israel and Palestine is completely different, because there's kind of an ethnic component to it, because it's pan-Arabism. Like from Morocco to Indonesia, those are Muslim countries, and they kind of feel this connection with Palestine. So that's part of the reason. Like if you're a political pundit and you post something that's critical of Israel or pro-Palestine, you're going to tap into a massive audience that you otherwise wouldn't be able to tap into, and you get massive engagement. You go, wow, this must be popular. And if you dive and just spot check the likes, these aren't going to be Westerners. These are going to be, Indonesians. These are going to be Pakistanis. These are going to be Algerians.
Well, so Laura Loomer brought this up, and I didn't fact check it, but this was the point she made, that Jackson Hinkle is now in Moscow.
Yeah.
He had one famous tweet where he said that something about GTA having a female lead was because of Israel. and he got thousands of retweets for it. And it's like, he found his audience. There are many people around the world who hate Israel, and they'll make you rich and famous.
Wait, what was the argument though?
I can't remember. Let me see if I can find what he said.
Well, he identifies as a MAGA communist, which is a non-starter.
I've never heard that one before.
Jackson Hinkle?
Yeah, Jackson Hinkle identifies as a quote MAGA communist, but he's tapping into that third world engagement farming. It's a big thing.
Does that mean
I don't know. Here you go.
Fiscally left, socially right?
think it means mental
GTA 6
illness.
is haram Zionist propaganda. Ban GTA 6. When did he post this? December 5th, 2023. It's got 3,500 retweets, 1.6 million views. It's like,
Yeah.
and then he made a rock star.
It must be a joke. It must be
Tim,
a
there
joke.
was
Maybe.
There's
Tim,
no
there
way he
was a-
really
Maybe.
means that.
Tim, there was a story 2 weeks back, and I think adds an interesting layer to this. It's in the Wall Street Journal. The headline was BCG fires 2 partners over Gaza aid work. And the headline is the actual story is somewhat the inverse of the actual headline here. Really what happened was 2 Boston Consulting Group partners. And if you're not familiar with Boston Consulting Group, it's sort of a prestigious elite American consulting firm. And they picked up 2 contracts in Gaza, but basically on behalf of Israel, and we're doing implementation work there. And the reason why this story is interesting is that they essentially got fired for doing that work on behalf of Israel. And what I think is what's notable about that is that basically some of this sentiment has moved beyond just activist groups and things like this, right? That's a serious institution that's quite influential in America, where I think that sort of work probably would have slid by maybe 5 years ago or something like that. But in this case, the partners were fired for basically executing work, and you can read more on the details of it, for basically executing work in Gaza on behalf of Israel. So.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.